Have you ever heard the two words digital transformation and thought to yourself, what the heck is that? And is it something I should be paying attention to for my organization? Well, my guest today will help you understand what it is and how it could be applied to your company to help you better serve your customers, work more efficiently, and get more ROI out of your marketing and sales budget. He has seen it all from his time on a Navy ship where he was testing and troubleshooting PLCs. Some of you know what that is, and worked from there and worked into a marketing role as a business analyst, where he helps companies today solve business challenges utilizing systems and processes. We have a great time talking about all the digital transformation that he's seen in his career and how to gain traction when things are stalling or maybe you can't get executive approval for a specific project. And then the hint is it all starts with business need and taking one project at a time. Let's do this.
Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content. Here is your host, Wendy Covey.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. On each episode, I'll break down an industry trend, challenge, or best practice in reaching technical audiences. You'll meet colleagues, friends, and clients of mine who will stop by to share their stories. And I hope that you leave each episode feeling inspired and ready to take action. Before we jump in, I'd like to give a brief shout out to my agency, Trew Marketing. Trew is a full-service agency located in beautiful Austin, Texas, serving highly technical companies. For more information, visit trewmarketing.com. And now, on with our podcast. Hi, everyone. I'm here with Douglas Karr. He's the founder of the Martech Zone and the vice president of Highbridge, which is a digital transformation consulting and development firm. Welcome to the show, Douglas.
Thank you for having me.
Where are you coming to me from?
I am just outside Indianapolis, Indiana.
And what's it like today in Indy?
It's a little chilly. It's a little chilly out there, but we haven't had too much snow or anything, so it's nice.
Good. And I know also in your office today is another guest,
Oh
a furry
yeah,
guest.
yeah. Gambino, he will probably interrupt us at any moment because every time I'm speaking to the camera, he thinks that I'm talking to him. So
Well, he likes to be talked to. There's nothing wrong with that.
exactly.
Well, I have a bird dog that's 16 years old and she can't hear a
Oh,
thing, but she's still,
oh,
kind of
that's
going
fantastic.
strong. Yeah, yeah. Well, Douglas, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. I think we're going to have a lot of fun just walking through your history in marketing and also in engineering and your perspective on how database marketing has changed and digital transformation. And I think we'll all learn a lot from your experience. So it should be a good time.
I hope so. Let's do this.
All right. So first, before we get started, I introduced Highbridge as a digital transformation firm. What is digital transformation to you?
Yeah, for me, there's kind of two pieces to it. Is one, internally within your organization, there's opportunities to automate and improve accuracy and centralize data and information. And so digitally, your employees are transformed, right? So if I want to look up a customer and I want to see all of their transactions, complaints, support calls, I can go to one central place and I can find all the information I need. And so most companies have dozens of systems, everything from accounting to workflow and content publishing and everything else. Centralizing that information is really, the opportunity for a company to digitally transform itself, because then it's just easier for people to do their work. The second side of it is the flip side, is the customer experience. And so the opportunity there is, how can you use digital technology to basically transform your customer experience? And now digital transformation, before we talked about it before pre-COVID, and a lot of what we were doing was that external experience. So if I'm a customer, my bank teller is right here, right? I don't go to the bank. This is how I take a picture and deposit my checks. This is how I log support requests. This is how I check my balance. This is how I pay. And so I don't even have to have a bank anymore because this is my bank. And so a good example of that, they're not a client or anything, but would be Chase, right? They've done a
Hmm.
fantastic job on their application. And so the digital transformation that Chase made was they put their bank, in an app, and really just made it so simple for people to utilize and everything, that it evolved their business. And so companies really struggle. They have all of these disparate systems and processes and people, and so sometimes it's people that need educated, sometimes it's processes that could be optimized, and then obviously there's platforms that can help with that. And we try to take a holistic look of all three. And I talked about pre-COVID. Post-COVID is, okay, companies, are really, some of them are cash poor, some of them have had to do layoffs, some of them had to really, strain under economic conditions. And so now, where we used to work on customer experiences a ton, post COVID, we're working on automation a lot to help
Hmm.
these companies kind of, get through with the resources that they have.
Yeah, whether it's touchless or, some sort of self-service. I've noticed, even I went to put fuel in my car the other day, and they had replaced the fuel pumps with more updated ones. And aside from the annoying, I think it was Chive TV or whatever that was squawking at
Right.
me, I also noticed all these new payment options, right? So instead of touching the germy machine with my credit card, I could wave Google Pay or Apple Pay,
Right.
and it looked like even more options were coming. So, yet again, another transformed experience for the consumer.
Yeah, and it's interesting for the United States. We were actually kind of behind the times on some of that stuff when you compared us to like Asia. Asia, wireless payments were huge. That's how they 99% of their, I'd say 99.999% of their transactions were done through devices, and the United States was still working with cash and checks a lot. And so this really has accelerated the digital payment side of the business.
Interesting. Well, I want to take a step back because I want to look at how we got here. And you and I, when we met previously, both commiserated a bit over things like Lotus Notes and programmatic databases, and just life in being a business professional in the '90s. And but even before the '90s, you started your career as an electrician's mate in the U.S. Navy,
I
and
sure
you
did.
even did some programming in NI's LabVIEW.
Yeah.
So tell me how someone starts working as an electrician and becomes a marketer and a database expert.
Yeah, it's funny. Once I explain kind of the path, it totally makes sense, but a lot of people are just shocked.
On
Um,
paper, it sure doesn't.
yeah, exactly. On paper, it doesn't. So I'll take you back to my days as an industrial electrician. Basically, is what it was within the Navy. Most of my time, every single day, was, reading publication manuals, writing publication manuals, doing preventive maintenance, and then fixing equipment. So troubleshooting and repairing. And when you think about that, it's writing, following instructions to a T, and then logically troubleshooting equipment. And so the Navy just taught me an incredible discipline there on basically how to utilize equipment to measure, test, troubleshoot, and then repair. And so I'm forever thankful for that. I was out at sea for 4.5 years. I was repairing equipment day in and day out, and it just made me a really good troubleshooter. That discipline to troubleshooting. Well, while I was in the Navy, PLCs, were starting to take their place, programmable logic controllers. And your listeners, if you have some older listeners or watchers, they'll laugh at this, but we even had drum systems that were, it was 100 switches, and the drum would slowly
Oh,
move, and the
wow.
drum and the switches would go in and out and everything. And I had to repair, some of that
Oh,
equipment.
goodness. It's kind of
Then
like
we went.
having a mainframe computer in the room. Dot
Exactly.
matrix printer.
Yeah. And so then we moved to programmable logic controllers, which
Mhm.
basically we could put timing, we could basically program when things turned on and off, and timing, and everything. And oh, here he comes. See, there's Gambino.
There he is.
Um And so programmable logic controllers, I just caught onto them quick. I really loved the fact that I could program and test and everything else. And typically you hooked up a laptop to a programmable logic controller reader, and then it was ladder logic, most of it, on changing timing and distances and everything else. And I just had a blast with that. Well, probably around the end time in the Navy, I got out in 92. That's when all of a sudden we started to get computers in the Navy. What's funny is I think our ship had one computer outside of one, I should say one PC. There was controllers and computing equipment all over, but an actual Microsoft Windows PC, we had one
One.
on the ship, and
Hard to
and we
imagine
shared
now.
yeah, we shared time on it, and so then I got out of the Navy, and I was totally addicted. When I would sit down on watch, a lot of times I would just sit there and play with the computer, just trying to figure it out all day, and absolutely just became obsessed with it. And at the time I went out and bought one. People would laugh now. I think I spent like $8,000, and it was and it was a terrible brand too. It was like, that was the
Like
cheapest I could.
knockoff.
Yeah. And but I just wanted to learn this technology, and I started playing with it. And I had played, I think, with a Radio Shack TRS-80 back in high school, and I had played with an Apple II,
You
back
were a
then.
tinkerer.
Yeah, I was a tinkerer, but I
Did
didn't
you have
own them.
circuitry in your,
Yeah,
my brother, he's an
the Apple
electrical.
II. Yeah,
Yeah. He had like circuits. He would go
yeah,
fix people's TVs in high school.
yeah.
Future electrical engineer.
Exactly. And so I was always someone that was just curious, and computing was just amazing to me. Well, fast forward, I got a job at a newspaper, and that was really the pivot. Was I got out of the Navy with an honorable discharge, and I went to work for the shipyards for a while and everything else. But then I picked up this amazing job actually the Virginian Pilot out in Norfolk, Virginia. And the founders of that company, the owners of that company, it was privately owned. They were already, they saw the writing on the wall. And so one of my first jobs there was we replaced a satellite system where page data was actually being transmitted from downtown to our production facility. And I think it was like, 1,200, bytes per second or something. It was so slow. And on
Oh,
cloudy
wow.
days, it would take us longer to pass data. And then every once in a while, a wind would come and the satellite would, the receiver would kind of twist, and you'd have to go up and realign. And
Oh
like,
my
that's,
goodness.
and so then
You
all of a
didn't just
sudden,
use the fax machine?
yeah,
I mean,
exactly. Well,
I think it may have been
think,
easier.
well, you got to think a newspaper page from a pixel density standpoint
Oh,
is
yeah,
massive,
sure.
massive, just a ton, hundreds of megabytes. And so one of the first jobs was, hey, we can put fiber and connect this stuff via fiber. And so that's what we did. We started connecting with fiber, and then the PLC programming that I was doing, all of a sudden we realized, hey, we could connect like a 486, PC to a PLC controller all day long and just capture data. And so we started connecting PCs to the PLCs, and then we started monitoring maintenance, uptime, downtime, what equipment was breaking the most, not breaking the most. And then we actually got into predictive maintenance. So instead of, once every 3 months, go clean out this, piece of machinery, if we saw that it had a higher failure rate, we would do it once a month or once a week. And if it never broke for a year, why go do PM on it? Wait a year or wait 9 months to do it. And so we really started to get a lot more efficient, and we saw equipment times just kind of skyrocket. And at a newspaper, the saying is that, if the presses aren't rolling, you're not making money. And
Mhm.
so you just wanted to keep everything running all the time. Well, that I was programming pages, building databases, using OS2 Warp was my, back then, and Microsoft, and just having a blast, just pulling all this Microsoft Access databases and,
Oh boy. Hey,
pushing,
those are still a thing, right?
yeah,
For
yeah,
somebody.
exactly, pushing and pulling data. And I then got I got a job as an analyst where I really got to start to do a ton of automation. So we used to do these 26-step processes to take data from subscriber data and put it down to a machinery level. And I just figured out, oh, I could automate that piece and then automate that piece. And I
Mhm.
joke with people that I think I had a Motorola StarTAC phone. I don't know if people remember those, but I literally started to like work. My production manager was an amazing gentleman, still a friend of mine. But his thing was, hey, if you keep automating, um, I don't care what you do all day. And so I literally sat there
Okay.
and kind of automated my job where I could reattempt through a SMS message. I could reattempt processing jobs and stuff. I'd go out to lunch for 2 hours and not have to do anything. I would get text messages that this job was received and that job was starting. And so I automated myself out of a job, kind of. And when I did that, people started to kind of take notice that, hey, he's really talented in this area. And I wouldn't say that I'm a great developer. I just saw opportunities where automation could take place. And so,
Yeah, it's the
um,
analyst part of you that can
yeah,
connect business need to technology and figure
yeah.
out, yeah, how to
Yeah, and
leverage
then
it.
personally, it's I hate doing the same type of job twice. I hate it. I hate repetition. And so if I have to do something twice, I'm usually saying, how can I automate this? How is there a way that I could, is there a tool out there? Is there code out there? Is there a solution out there where I could automate this? And about that time, that's when newspapers started to do a lot more, subscriber retention analysis and database analysis and database marketing. And so I wound up getting recruited by a company in Denver, Colorado that was, world renowned for their database marketing in the newspaper industry. And so I moved out to Denver and helped the New York Times build out a national database, which was terabytes, which was not even heard of at the time. Toronto Globe and Mail, and then started working with these export, transform, and load, extract, transform, and load ETL tools, and just, I just didn't care what the platform was. I would figure out how to program it, and so I was working across languages, across platforms, across technologies, and just was totally addicted. And then I had two kids out there, and my ex-wife was actually lived outside of Louisville, and so I was flying the kids back and forth between
Oh,
Colorado
wow.
and Louisville, and I said, you know what, the dot bomb started to hit, so funding started to dry up in these big database marketing agencies and everything, and so I decided to move to Indianapolis, got a job at the local newspaper, and helped them
Oh,
for,
back to your roots.
yep, back to my roots, but help them digitize, for 2.5 years, built a direct marketing arm of the company, and just advancing the technology, and then really saw that the newspapers weren't sold on it. And I still love newspapers. If I walk into a press room, I still love the smell of ink. But I just saw that they were so ingrained with, from top down within their organizations of people that were print, that they weren't really sold on digital no matter what.
Mm.
And so it wound up becoming friction for me there with leadership, that, I'm showing them all the growth, and I'm showing them all the stuff that we're doing,
Yeah, you're the
and they didn't
change agent
and they
there.
and they didn't really care.
Ah.
Um, and so, long story short, I got fired, which which there's
Hey,
a lesson there to everybody.
absolutely.
That sometimes opportunities come, and I tell people I've had a series of just luck. I went home and I sat down on the couch and I thought, man, I'm a single dad. I'm unemployed. What a failure I am. And the phone rang, and it was a friend of mine, Pat Coyle, good guy, and he said, hey, I'm trying to help the Colts really get, you know, the Indianapolis Colts, get up digitally. Do you have any time? And I said, well, matter of fact, I have tons of time on my hand right now. And so I went and worked for the Colts, which was magical because it was Super Bowl season, and helped them do integrations over there with their with Ticketmaster, and then email marketing. And the email marketing company that I talked them into using was ExactTarget, which was an Indianapolis based fledgling, kind of email marketing company. And the second kind of, maybe it's the second or third, kind of lucky point came was they heard what I did over there. And one of the founders, Scott Dorsey, took me out for pizza one day. And of course, I'm old school, so I'm dressed in a suit and tie and everything else.
Oh, from your newspaper
Yeah,
days.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I sit down in front of Scott and tell him, what I've been up to, and he hands me a stack of jobs, and he goes, "Well, pick one of these jobs, and you got it."
We
And that
just
was
want you over here.
that was, and so I picked integration consultant because that was, to
Yeah.
me, it was working externally with all these companies and doing the same thing, figuring out how to automate and how to use these systems.
And
And
an ever-changing position. So you're not
yeah,
doing the same thing. You're always
right.
talking to someone new with new challenges.
Yeah, I'm talking to sales with prospects. I'm talking to customers with problems. I'm talking to the development team on what solutions might work. And so I worked at ExactTarget for another 2.5 years, and they just, skyrocketed in growth. And eventually it got to a point where, and this is no criticism of the company. Every company that grows that fast, you start building layers of management and
Oh,
bureaucracy
sure.
and silos and stuff. And I'm not that way. You can't, you can't put baby in a corner, right? and and so I got bored, and I left for 1 year because I had a non-compete basically that I couldn't go work for any of the partners or anything. I left for 1 year and worked in e-commerce and analytics because I felt that was a piece of my resume that was weak. And then came back after that year and worked for a couple of the other startups that other partners had built. And then, of course, ExactTarget sold for I think it was $2 billion or $3 billion to Salesforce, and started my own agency. Had a blast running my own agency. My business partner was an amazing business partner, and she decided to split off and start her own agency, which is doing incredible. And I kind of said, well, what are my next steps here? And so I was speaking and doing education and just straight consulting for about a year, and then just got sucked back into the Salesforce sphere. They have a real problem in their industry where they have tons of people that can kind of, the example is, a mechanic. They have tons of mechanics in their industry that know how to turn the bolts and get the system running, but they don't have a lot of people that can kind of train the race car driver. And so,
Mhm.
three other gentlemen that I know that have, I think, probably 20 years in the industry as well. We kind of put our heads together and said, why don't we go, help these people kind of transform how they're using the platform? Because in digital transformation, as there's a high failure rate. I think it's, 2/3 of projects, and these are enterprise, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars. I think it's like 2/3 of them don't realize a return on investment. And most of that isn't because of the capabilities of the platform. It's really the priority and how it's implemented and how it's really leveraged, within the organization.
Yeah, how it's adopted. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And so
It,
we,
I
and
have
so
not heard that statistic.
yeah,
That is, I'm just imagining all the money and effort that goes into an implementation. 2/3, that's
yeah.
atrocious.
Well, and I think, I mean, you know this as well. These aren't silver bullets, these platforms. And then when you're enterprise, these systems are wide open. They can be customized and transformed and integrated, and there's a million capabilities with them. And so you're a content marketer, I'm a content marketer. If we're going to write a use case on our platform, we write a use case about how this company transformed and 400% efficiency and everything else. And that's what happens in an industry a lot is people look at the platform and they think, oh, well, they're in, the Forrester, quadrant. Their Gardner
Hmm.
says that they're fantastic. All of their, ratings and reviews are fantastic. We're going to pick that because that's a safe purchase. And unfortunately, that doesn't it doesn't take care of your people and process issues.
No.
And so I think most of the time our job is to is to kind of create a roadmap of maturity for a company and say, you know what, you spent the money, you're paying the licensing fees. Here's the first thing that we can do to help recoup some of that. Here's the next thing that we can do.
Oh,
Here's
I
the
love
next thing.
that. A
Yeah.
roadmap to maturity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not feel overwhelmed by it has all unlimited capability. I have to do all of it all at once.
right.
And then, when you're everything to everybody, you're nothing to anybody, right?
Well, that's
So,
it. And
yeah,
these poor companies, I feel sorry sometimes because they get their login and they open up and there's 10,000 things that they could do, and they just go, oh my God,
run
and
away.
yeah, and then migration, sometimes they don't have the time
Mhm.
to train their people. Sometimes they don't have the talent to integrate internally. So almost every time when you're implementing enterprise software, you have to get a partner. And Salesforce has its own internal consulting, but they can't possibly keep up with demand. I think they want to grow to like 400 different partner agencies around the country to help with this. That's how high the demand is.
Mhm.
And they're highly dependent on these partners, because if a partner screws up an implementation, then the company fails, then they don't renew, and it steamrolls like that.
So, for a company who has disparate systems, let's say in the middle market, so marketing's over here, sales is over there, accounting's there, and so forth. Where do you see the biggest bang? Like, where do you tend to
Yeah.
start to integrate? And are there places where you draw a line and you say, you can leave that there forever, or at least
Yeah.
for now?
That's a great question, and it goes outside the platforms again. Is typically what we do when we're talking to clients is we talk to the people at the top end, and we identify, what are your goals? Why are you going down this road? What are your competitors doing? What made you, kind of call us or talk to these people about platforms? And typically they'll talk about, well, we're spending a ton of money on this, or we're not seeing return on that, or our customers have a far greater experience, or something like that. And then we start talking to people down the ladder. And we start seeing, all the way down to, what is your job like every single day? And
Mhm.
in marketing, which is, obviously where I love to work, in marketing, oftentimes we find that marketers who are creative individuals who come up with extremely amazing ideas for how to, promote a company and stuff, most of their day is spent moving data, you know, and when you have all of those systems, so they're querying accounting data and they're trying to align that with maybe it's renewal information, and what makes someone renew versus not renew. And then how do we how do we take that and how do we say, well, if everybody that renewed, their companies like this, and so how do we look up more companies like that, and how do we write content to companies like that? And so there's this huge chain. Well, all the way through all of that analysis, they're not getting any work done that's creative, that which is their strength. And so what we wind up seeing is when we find out what the organization's goals are at the top, and then we start going down the ladder and we find out what people are doing on a daily basis, that's where we see those huge gaps and opportunities. And so we'll talk to, maybe it's in a recent company that we were working with, um, their email marketing people, literally it was like a production shop. They were just pumping and dumping emails all day long. I mean,
Ooh.
and then it was seasonal. So so towards the end of the year, they're working, 15 hours a day trying to keep up with the demands. And so the opportunity for them was to go to, hey, instead of, batch and blast type emails, why don't we create customer journeys, and why don't we string together a bunch of events and timelines, and actually design a process. And the output of that now is, now they're not pumping and dumping emails all day. Now they have a process. Maybe it's their seasonal giving starts in October through, January, 30th or whatever. And so we can create a journey, create a series of emails. And then now what they can do is, on a daily basis, monitor the performance of those emails and tweak them. And so they can A/B test, they can add new images, they can update statistics, they can update the content. And so now all of a sudden they get a lot of time back into their day, where they're not, creating that next email from scratch. And now they're able to spend their time creatively and actually enhance results. And that's what we tend to see is we see these opportunities where within the organization where there's those automation. And then of course, externally, we flip it over as well. We were working with a company out east, and I think they were working on an implementation for 2 years and literally had not launched the platform
Oh,
yet that they
two
were working. Yeah.
years.
And it was a massive organization.
Wow.
And so the company called us as kind of a last ditch effort to come in and see whether there was opportunities. Well, we sat and worked with their leadership team, and then we started to identify that a majority of their profit within the company was coming from one central small kind of portion of the overall business. They had like a
Mhm.
key account, type thing.
Sure.
And so we basically came in and said, look, you've spent all this money and you're trying to, eat this elephant, you know, and why don't we just take this one portion of your business and let's see what we can do to flip that. And so what wound up being this huge project, corporation wide that touched hundreds of people, wound up instead of just a key accounts of a dozen people and helping them automate their processes and reporting and everything else to make their jobs easier. And then, revenue skyrocketed, profitability skyrocketed, and then we could go to the next data,
Mhm.
the next center and the next center. And so those are like good examples of where, again, we're not talking about platforms here. We're talking about internal resources and where are people spending the most time and where is it most painful. And for them, the customer experience then was, transformed as well. That all of a sudden key accounts had a much better experience, much better communication, much better resources online, all of those pieces that actually help them, move faster through the customer journey and actually, get to a purchase. And so
I
those are
think
two examples.
yeah, they're very good examples for a couple of reasons. Obviously, there's a theme here of breaking down the big elephant into the bite-sized chunks.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know how PC that is these
Yeah.
days to say it that way, but
I don't know that anybody eats an elephant, but yeah,
yeah, well,
we'll say a
we,
big steak.
there you go. There you go. Good, big Texas ribeye.
Yeah.
But aside from that, it's a good reminder because I feel like we as marketers often pitch to leadership the need to integrate systems or upgrade our platforms, and we talk about it around the tool instead of talking about it in terms of efficiency, impact
Yeah.
to the customer, impact to the business. And I love that you started there. How will this help you be more creative? How will this help you better serve your customers? How will this help you be more efficient and get time back in your life? And
Right.
so I imagine that at times you're in that same position where you have a champion within the account that's brought you in that really wants to do these creative things, and you partner with them to help pitch and woo management into saying yes.
Yeah.
So, in any tips for those marketers that are sort of stuck in this, come on, I need approval, I need to win over leadership?
Um, uh, this will be my non-PC
We're already eating
responses.
elephants. We're already
Yeah,
non-PC.
yeah.
Go for it.
Well, some companies won't, right? Sometimes, I was working with a company, this is probably, 5, 6 years ago, that they had a sustained inbound process that was coming from radio that was really good. And so every month they could, they knew that they could get, whatever, 150 leads, through their radio programming and advertising. And but over the last 3 years, it was dwindling. It was like, you know, 5 or 10 less per month, 5 or 10 less per month.
Spotify.
Yeah. Yeah. And so yeah. And so they knew that their leadership said, well, this digital thing, exactly what you're saying, like Spotify and there's these other channels. So we need to talk
Sure.
to somebody in this industry. And so we helped them, I think it was for about 90 days. And then we had to tell them goodbye. And the problem was is that their leadership team was, uh, everything was, but radio does this, but radio does this, but radio does this. And the problem was that their entire culture was wrapped around that solution, which was getting diminished returns. And we weren't going to change the culture within the organization. And so there wasn't any use in us continuing with them. And
Mhm.
we weren't mean about it. We just said, I mean, I think I gave the example in newspapers before. I always tell people that, newest newspapers weren't killed by digital. They committed suicide, but they weren't they weren't killed. And what I mean by that is that within a newspaper, they weren't bought into digital, and all of their leadership was 40, 30 and 40 years of newspaper, experience, and they were brilliant newspaper people. But what they needed was digital people, and they
Mhm.
were, and then if a digital person came in, that person was kind of the enemy culturally within the organization, because everything was built around, print and distribution and everything. And so there's some organizations where, as an employee, you do have to sit back and you have to say, am I fighting the good? Is this place really going to turn? Is it really, is the culture here actually going to accept this, or is the culture, just going to continue where my job every day is just frustrating? And sometimes you have to leave. For a marketer that sees opportunity, though, for a marketer that sees that their leadership is open to it. I always like that story of, there's an old Navy story. I don't know if you ever heard of a monkey's paw. It's basically a little rope knot, you know, and so you have these massive ropes on the ship, and you have to take, and that's what holds the ship to the pier and everything else. But you can't throw that rope and lasso, the thing. So instead, you tie this monkey's paw in this tiny rope. You throw the monkey's, well, I forget what it's called, some kind of knot or whatever. You throw that to the guy on the pier, and then he pulls in, the big rope. And that's the same kind of approach that a marketer could take, is if they can talk to their organization, and the organization is open to testing, then the marketer can say, look, I'm not asking for us to totally digitally transform. I'm not asking, for the organization to do this. But what I'd like to do is do this one test, and here's the budget associated with it. It might fail, but we could learn some things from it. And but it might also open your eyes that there's opportunity out there. And so I kind of take a look at two of those things. Is I try to look at what the competition is doing, and where are they succeeding that we're failing, and then what could that monkey's paw be? What could that one pet project be that I could bring within the organization that could turn some heads? And typically those are there. You're brilliant from a content marketing standpoint. That SEO can drive leads. And so it might not be pay per click, it might not be advertising, because that could be a more expensive, buy-in or whatever. But maybe it's, what, I want to spend a month and do research, primary and secondary research, get some graphic designs done, and maybe it's build a beautiful ebook that walks someone, from front to back, through our products or services. And if you can just sell that internal, and then, obviously, all of a sudden you're going to see some leads, and you're going to see some traction, and you're going to see some SEO, and you're going to see some people registering for download. Now you can go back to your leadership team and say, okay, I want to kind of walk you through, we spent whatever, $25,000 on this initiative, and we built all the pages, and we built the content, and we hired graphic designers. Here's what we came up with, and here are the results, and here's the trend, right? Because, with SEO, from an organic search standpoint, it's typically, maybe month one, it didn't do anything, but by month three, all of a sudden it's
Oh,
starting to
yeah,
take
there's
off.
definitely a lag.
Yeah.
And
And
what else I could see along with this example, because I love where you're going with this, is also and we can replicate this, but in order to do that, here's how much time it took. And
Right.
systems could cut that by a third or a half or whatever it is
Yeah.
in order to bring this to scale for our organization.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I always try is like, what is there something that we could do to, to get these folks to kind of open up that, oh, the data is showing that this is moving in the right direction. It might not be profitable, right? You could spend that money and produce an amazing ebook and everything else, and you might not close anybody in, 60 or, 90 days, but if you can show people, here's the trend. We did one job and here's the trend on that.
Mhm.
Typically, a good leader or a good manager will look at that and go, oh, that sounds like there's an opportunity here to, let's try a second test, or let's try a third test. And what did we learn from this first one that we would apply to the next one? And typically that's kind of the road that I go down is if we can flip their perceptions or misconceptions about digital and the opportunity, then it kind of snowballs, and a good company, where the culture is open to that change, they're going to start kind of moving down that road. The other piece of that too is I always ask people this, right? You, you probably do the same thing. We had this conversation when we were talking about doing a podcast together, and that's that a lot of times when people are really close to this, like, well, what do you mean building out a website and building out, a content library and a set of articles and everything else? We've been selling with, dial for dollars, or
Yeah.
for 20 years,
Let's just throw another salesperson at it.
let's throw another salesperson at it. And you ask them, well, tell me about the last big purchase that you made at your company. And they might talk about a car, or they might talk about an office complex, or yeah, how did you find them? Well, where did you go do that research? How did you,
Hmm.
and 99% of the time, it's not, well, I had a sales guy call me or a sales lady call me.
Or wait,
99.
I opened up a printed catalog.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
forget that one.
Yeah, exactly.
No, no one's
99% of the
doing that.
time it's, well, I did a search and I found this and I found that. And and you go, wow, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that you're someone that you're looking at your own business and you're apprehensive about, transforming your business digitally, yet you're, you're adopting digital, on your own and moving in that direction. And that's,
Hmm.
nowadays you see that everywhere, right? I mean, I asked you how how you got your business, and your first response was, these engineers, go and they find us online and they start reading about us and they touch base with us. And over time,
Absolutely.
yeah,
100% inbound. Yep.
yeah,
Through
yeah.
search. So, wow. Well, this was so helpful. I think the role that you play as a business analyst is so critical, and a lot of small to medium sized companies don't have that function, have never interacted with that function, and it was helpful to just walk through what you do and how you help companies sort of bridge that gap between process and technology and business need. And it's a very unique role. Not everybody is great at it, and so I appreciate you being out there helping marketers do
Yeah.
this, and giving advice today on those that are frustrated within their own company cultures of here's some paths, whether it works out or whether that person needs to go somewhere else, which is viable too. So
Yeah.
uh,
Well,
thank
that
you.
the irony is, 30 years ago, I was using a meter to troubleshoot equipment, and now I'm using analytics and competitive research and everything, and I'm still troubleshooting
Troubleshooting
and
those PLCs all
yeah,
over
yeah,
again. So maybe that's where the marketers can go, go
yeah,
hop on a ship and work on the
yeah,
PLCs. So, or not, or
exactly.
not. Well, Douglas, how can people connect with you?
The site that I love that I've been doing, I think for 12 years now, is called Martech Zone. So martech.zone. And then, of course, you can listen to the podcast, which you've been on, Martech Zone Interviews. That's at a different URL, interviews.martech.zone. Those are the two. And then the consulting side of the business is Highbridge Consultants And so it's just a big URL there.
And just
But
Google it,
yeah,
just like
yeah.
we talked about,
And you
right?
could Google me. If you Google Douglas with Karr, you'll see me everywhere. So
Great. And parting advice for our listeners today?
yeah, I mean, my parting advice is it's overwhelming, right? These systems can be, so broad and everything else. And so what I was talking about before with, just chopping it down and trying to analyze one problem that you have and how you could solve that one problem, I think that's critical. Finding a good, I'm not trying to sell my own service, but you're in the industry as well. Finding that good consultant that has had exposure to other industries, other companies, other platforms, to me is almost an essential, because your job at a company is to do your job and is to get your job done. Most of the time at a company, you just don't have that exposure and that opportunity to look at broadly what's happening with technology and your industry and everything else. And so my parting advice would be identify that, that problem where you see it, boy, if we could just fix this one problem,
Yeah.
we could get ahead, and then go look for a resource to help you, because the resources are out there. I think the great thing about your company and my company is that we work across industries, customers, clients. We've seen all these, and so what we're able to take is those tidbits of information and bring those tidbits back in that intelligence. So a lot of people look for output, how many blog posts can you write for us? Where your expertise comes in is, no, we've seen that problem before, and here's a solution that worked for it. And that's going to save you so much time and frustration and effort. And so that's what I say: identify a problem and then go find a resource that can help you fix that problem. And invariably, you're going to see success there.
Great. Thank you so much, Douglas. Appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to resources, visit truemarketing.com/podcast. While there, you can subscribe to our blog and our newsletter and order a copy of my book, Content Marketing Engineered. Also, I would love your reviews on this podcast. So please, when you get a chance, subscribe and leave me your review on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks and have a great day.